Alright guys, well this one was kind of a tough one. This game, really it's a true military simulation. It is a digital war game, and it's called Combat Mission Black Sea. And until about 2 weeks ago, it was a fictional title used to simulate a fictional conflict occurring in Ukraine between Russia and the government in Kiev. Now, as we all know, that fictional conflict has become real. And this military simulation, this war game, allows us to analyze the terrain and the units that are currently engaged in combat as we speak, and really take a look at some of the details that are, as we speak, unraveling on the other side of the world from where I now sit. And I acknowledge that this is a sensitive subject, and I want to make sure that this isn't viewed as me attempting to capitalize on a trend. Instead, I want to use this as an opportunity to increase awareness on what's happening in that part of the world, and also learn from some of the tactical decisions and the strategic decisions that have been made through the course of the conflict so far. I've demonetized this video, and I will for the rest of the videos in this series. And I've also begun a fundraiser to UNICEF, which is the children's fund that is currently on the ground in Ukraine, providing aid, shelter, medical care, sanitation, and education to the children that are being affected by the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. With that all out of the way, let's take a look at what this campaign calls for us to do. The date is June 28th, 2017, and we are 30 kilometers northeast of Kiev. As I sit here, the closest Russian forces to Kiev, as is being reported in the media, are about 20 to 30 kilometers to the northwest of Kiev, on the other side of the Dnieper River, the same side as Chernobyl in the image shown on screen right now. The force we face today is northeast of Kiev, towards the Cherniv region, which is also being contested and heavily fought as we speak. And we're working along an MSR called E95. And our force, our friendly force, is the 3rd Battalion Tactical Group of the 72nd Mechanized Brigade. This is a mechanized infantry battalion, and we're also augmented with some tanks from 1st Armored Brigade. So a mech infantry force with some heavy armor. We're facing a pretty robust force of Russian armored personnel and mechanized personnel that are going to have access to BMPs and MTLBs and tanks and artillery and all the rest. And our mission is to fight a delaying action that will allow us to hold off the siege of Kiev for long enough for that defense to take shape. As we fight this series of missions, we won't be reconstituted, we won't receive more troops or more vehicles. The losses we take will endure through this entire campaign. So this is the first mission. And the situation here is that 1st Company, 3rd Battalion Tactical Group, 72nd Mechanized Brigade. It's 6:15 in the morning. The Russians have established a light screen here on the edge of the forest to watch for our movements. Our first task is to destroy the screen in order to blind the Russians to our local movements and allow further movement north on Highway E95. First thing we do anytime that before we begin our plan is we take a look at the terrain where we think the enemy might be arrayed. This is a process called intelligence preparation of the battlefield, in which we describe the operational environment and how that operational environment might be have an effect on our course of action development. We also take a look at what we think the enemy composition might be, how they might be arrayed on the battlefield, and how they might fight us. We know that this is an enemy reconnaissance element. This is a Russian screen line. Their task, very likely, is to provide early warning for the rest of the Russian force so that the rest of the Russian force has early notification to our assault and is able to reorient on us. Typically, when you think of a screen, you think infantry in hide sites, potentially in battle positions, certainly in observation posts. You think that they probably integrated obstacles, or certainly have at least allocated fire support in defense of this screen. Their actions on contact are likely going to be to engage us with volley fire of some sort, shoulder-fired weapon systems, artillery, cannon fire, or something of the sort. Try to overwhelm us briefly so that they can then break contact. The screen itself will not want to become decisively engaged. They don't want to get in a big slugfest with a larger force. They want to provide early warning to their compatriots and then break contact. We take a look at the battlefield itself. We see that there's kind of a wood line right along the front edge of that village, up and down Highway Echo 95. There's trees on either side. There also appears to be a little structure between us and where the enemy very much might be arrayed. Looks like the MSR can come from the east, also deeper off map over here. And then there's 3 capture points that we need to occupy, plus destroy the enemy itself. Those green areas there are kind of like the capture points. If we want to talk about key terrain, we're doing some terrain analysis in addition to the enemy analysis that'll help us kind of understand where we think the enemy might be. Certainly key terrain, the intersection here, because it controls the movement into and out of this sector for the Russian defenders. They're likely going to be using this intersection, controlling it, defending it, so that they can retrograde out of this area before they are overwhelmed and destroyed. Other key terrain, potentially these 2 large buildings kind of towards the rear of the town. These would be like Alamo fallback positions. They are 3 or 4 stories tall. It looks like they have lots of open windows, good observation fields of fire. If we come to the front, if I'm a defender in this building, I've got really good observation in fields of fire in almost all directions, with the exception being the dead space behind these other houses to our front. But they're still the largest structures, maybe even barracks style structures that could very much be occupied. So given all of this, the other piece of key terrain was this large building I saw over here. This looks like a camp or barracks anyway. This thing also, it's the largest map, or the largest building on the entire map. It is truly 4 stories plus a rooftop, and it's surrounded on all 4 sides by a wall, so plenty of cover and concealment, lots of space to move around in these giant buildings. But remember, we're facing a screen, so we're thinking like a section size or platoon size element up against our giant mechanized company with armor. If I'm the enemy and I'm here to provide early warning, I likely am in the wood line here, looking deep down this road, because I want good observation and fields of fire down this road. Also probably over here, so I can make sure that my flank is covered. I can see down this long axis. And then I'm very likely arrayed in like the wood line here. Dismounted troops, camouflaged vehicles, hiding in the terrain so that I'm able to observe across that long open field, look for dust trails, look for thermal signatures and other indications of adversary that would be, Ukrainian movement in this case. That's how I think they're going to kind of be arrayed. That would be my guess. And then I think on contact, we can expect to see some cannon fire, some heavy volley fire from shoulder fires. And then I think we can expect to see them break contact to alternate and subsequent battle positions, then ultimately attempt to depart the area altogether rather than become decisively engaged by taking off up the MSR. So what do we have to contend with this challenge? And it is a challenge because this is a dangerous foe. Looks like we've got these BTRs. Yeah, BTR 4 Echoes, BM Oplots. So there's 4 main battle tanks and a whole bunch of BTRs. Infantry in the BTRs. And then on the other side over here, looks like we've got another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more BTRs with full complements of infantry. So given that wide array of combat power, how do we face this force? Well, let's take a little closer look at the terrain. It is an open field, but it's an open field with micro terrain. You guys see this right here? So there's micro terrain there, so I can theoretically get my BTRs into a hold down position unobserved. So if I move, reasonably slow, don't kick up a ton of dust, maintain some dead space, I can advance to a hold down position right here, get good eyes on that entire perimeter, and potentially start identifying and picking out targets in that vegetation. So I might aim very well to do that. Next kind of piece of micro terrain, if we look closely in this field, looks like it's this hill mass kind of right here, and that's even more significant. And it's silly to call micro terrain key terrain, but this looks to be key terrain based off its proximity to the objective and the fact that it is large enough to conceal a significant portion of my force. So I'm going to use, I think, those 2 pieces of cover to move my BTRs into position and establish what I would call a support by fire element to suppress the enemy so that I can throw a right hook with my tanks and seal off the north exit. At that point, I will have the enemy in an L, and I will fight with standoff and engage him from standoff to inflict as many casualties as possible before finally assaulting through and dealing the decisive blow to finish off the rest of the fight. Well, here we have our forces arrayed in preparation for our assault on the screen line that we identified during our mission analysis. And what I would say is I would usually want to opt for some sort of turning movement or flanking, or a flank attack of some sort as my form of maneuver given the situation. But we've got a large open area directly to our front. There's not a ton of cover and concealment for me to use during our assault. I could potentially come on this side of the road and use the concealment of these trees to try to isolate the north exit and seal off the enemy's escape. But because I know we're facing a screening element and not the full combat force of the adversary's military, I have arrayed myself in such a way that I can approach them with a broad frontage, with a lot of firepower out front, lead with my main battle tanks, and achieve tactical overmatch by getting as many guns in the fight as possible early and just simply trying to overwhelm the enemy. But what I have to keep in mind is that they're likely, as we are compromised, calling for fire, and we are indeed moving through their area of observation. Not a proper engagement area as it is a screening element, but nonetheless where they expect to see us coming from. However, what I am avoiding is this main MSR altogether, because I do believe that north exit is likely occupied by the enemy's strongest force at that intersection, that piece of key terrain, and very much likely oriented down this long axis with tank-killing munitions. So that's kind of the plan. We're going to lead with our tanks, make contact with the enemy, decimate them as best as we can with our heavy guns, move up with our BTRs and begin suppressing, and then if we must, deploy our infantry and work to assault across the objective. All right, really nothing significant to report. I don't know that we've even managed to spot any of the enemy quite yet. Indeed, we have not. We have made some decent progress here, though, along the frontage. I'm going to continue to let these guys move into these positions, and from these next locations, we'll make our kind of our next series of calls. Kind of as we expected, as we approach this inter-visibility line, our lead tanks managed to detect an incoming laser. This is a modern battlefield, and these modern main battle tanks have countermeasures that allow them to detect when they're being targeted by an infrared laser. That's exactly what happened in the case of that tank, and because of that, that tank had popped some countermeasures and then backed off. I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to delete the all of the current tasks of each of these tanks. I'm going to go ahead and let this guy reverse back down into that position to be safe. He'll spend a minute right there. All right, everybody else is kind of on track. We're about to make contact with our tanks up here. What I've done is this tank that just popped countermeasures, I'm going to let him fall back behind cover, pause for 10 seconds, then move into a hold down position behind his countermeasure over here, which is kind of where I think that laser may have came from. This tank, I'm going to allow him to do something similar. He's also got a little bit of micro terrain to his front, so that hold down task will put him directly in line, able to peek over the top of this piece of terrain. We're going to achieve something similar with this tank. It's likely going to require him to move up to this next hill mass potentially, and then this main battle tank, I'm going to have him go ahead and continue to move from this final destination here. I'm going to have him then hunt forward until he makes contact to about right there. All right, on the left side of the battlefield, we scored one catastrophic kill of an amphibious assault vehicle with this main battle tank. We also ended up taking a laser threat warning immediately after that and had to break contact just a little bit, so that's kind of where the position he's in right now. This next dude is in a little bit of defilade, moving up into his next cover and concealed position. It's going to end up being this hill mass right here. We're doing something similar with this tank right here. They're both going to end up kind of breaking over that IV line at about the same time. I am going to re-peek, I think, with this dude. We're just going to have to do it a little bit carefully. I'm going to have him go hold defilade right to the 12 o'clock. And I think we're also likely going to see some contact from this intersection up here as well. We are hunting with this tank on the side. I'm not committing BTRs quite yet. Still not in a position, I don't think, to risk that kind of squishier armor, as it were. So again, one tank here, one tank here, one tank here, one tank here. Still establishing kind of that frontal support by fire before moving forward with my infantry to move into the next phase of the operation. We're going to continue closing the distance with our tanks. We're actually moving up a section of infantry right now in the dead space behind this hill mass right here at key terrain 1. We are going to start putting some suppressive fires during this infantry movement just to protect these BTRs. I still haven't killed enough vehicles that I feel comfortable. Pretty significant turn here, so we're still readjusting our support by fire position, trying to get these tanks in the fight. One of the ways we're doing that is we put this big target arc right here. That's going to provide support by fire for this tank as it moves to the right and then starts punching up towards north exit. He's really just probing. I have him hunting, so he's moving super slow. The idea is as he spurs armor to react to him, it's immediately engaged by this tank that has his flank covered. We're also moving up BTRs behind that tank, so we have infantry and support right behind him. And then I'm continuing to move more infantry up behind key terrain 1, this hill mass. I'm also moving up this tank that was over here on the left. He hasn't observed much more enemy activity. He's going to use some of this vegetation in the ivy lines of this hill to mask his movement as he kind of creeps up and then rejoins the rest of the tanks. So we have consolidated support by fire. There's risk there. If we start taking indirect fire, we're masked. There's huge risk associated with that, but there's not a lot of terrain available to us to protect our force during this assault. So I think this is our best move for now. Pretty eventful turn here. We managed to knock out one additional vehicle with an ATGM. Easy win with that BTR. Then we actually lost that BTR. Took a couple casualties, it looks like. The bulk of that force actually did manage to escape. It looks like they traded mobility kills with this vehicle right over here. And the crew of this vehicle also did seem to depart. Sure enough, that crossroads that we kind of were declaring, key terrain does seem to be defended in the way that we sort of anticipated that it will. What I think I'm going to do here is go ahead and I'm going to establish a little support by fire and start targeting this just a little bit, get these guys suppressed. Want to be careful to protect the rest of these guys. I don't want to take any more casualties. Pretty wild little round here. Did take some damage during our break contact with this tank that was exposed. Finally going to start preparation for our next phase of the attack. It looks like we have a concentration of enemy here, but they're hiding behind smoke. We have an additional concentration over here, also hiding behind smoke. We have one support by fire established, and then we have another kind of security element on the flank. We've lost one vehicle. They've lost many. This next turn, we're going to begin suppressing even more so than we have already some of these positions that are deep. We're also going to move forward with our BTRs, put them on the support by fire, pop smoke from the tanks to protect their infiltration, dismount some infantry, and then prep them for movement onto the objective. We're going to have to really prep the target extremely well before we commit any sort of infantry to that fight. We're also going to throw that right hook, seal off the north exit when we move our infantry forward. Effective deployment of our troops. Vehicles are starting to get in position. We're nearly where we want to be. We're pushing forward hard on the left side with a big chunk of our infantry in the BTRs. We're also moving our dismounted infantry into position here. And we're moving the rest of our vehicles up into whole defilade fighting positions. On the right side, we're maintaining security. Let's see how this round unfolds. Biggest point of risk here is really moving up those BTRs on the left, frankly. All right, the plan here is to get the rest of my forces online, kind of hang behind this last IV line, get a good full entire turn of suppression in to soften up the last remaining bits of enemy resistance before finally getting my infantry out in their entirety and begin the movement across this corridor. This is going to be violent because as soon as we hit go, basically everything I've got is going to start suppressing here. Pretty effective turn. We know we have at least one vehicle moving over here behind this structure, still posing a risk to the force, and I think we had one squared off this way as well. So there's still enemy armor active in the village. We're starting to get some infantry out. Based off the amount of contact we've taken, I'm not going to advance my frontline trace this next turn. I am going to get some anti-tank infantrymen out of the fight and some of their shoulder-fired weapon systems into the fight. And then I'm going to use this next turn to continue using this position as an attack by fire to continue to attrit the enemy that's arrayed against me in the wood line. If I can knock out a few more of those vehicles, I'm not facing any major resistance. I don't want to risk my BTRs, but if I can get it to that point, I'll start moving forward with my infantrymen, start moving forward with the armor, see if we can push these guys out of this town and seal off that north exit. Brutal. Took one more vehicle loss this go around. Knocked out one enemy vehicle as well. It's tough. It's tough stuff. I don't know what you do. It's dangerous. Anytime you get this much mechanized combat power on the battlefield at once, I mean, casualties are going to happen on both sides. I'm going to go ahead and start trying to press forward on the right if I can to seal off the north exit and establish the right side of my L before moving forward with my infantry on the main avenue of approach. Our plan's continuing to take shape. We are going to sling this right hook with our BTR and our one tank on the right side, trying to seal off this north exit and create the right side of an L. And over here on the main avenue of approach, even though we've lost that one vehicle, we're going to continue to press. I've dismounted some infantry. They're going to start making their way forward slowly. We're going to be engaging past them with BTRs. There's a serious concern there, obviously, in the way of direct fire control measures, because we don't want to be shooting over or past infantry under any sort of realistic circumstance, although in this high-intensity conflict, we're accepting some of that risk and going to do it all the same, and use these BTRs and these tanks and the high elevation of those guns to shoot over the top of the infantry as they work their way through the field. We're also moving forward just a little bit with some of this armor to get them over this defilade, allow them to have the best effects down into this low ground that I'm not totally confident we have cleared out yet. This might be the riskiest turn so far. Here we go. all around continuing to dominate on both fronts along the main axis of advance and in our flank attack. I'm going to continue to press the right, see if we can seal off that north exit, and I'm going to continue to slowly move through this engagement area, frankly, and maintain heavy suppressive fire as we do it. The challenge here, of course, is ammo preservation. Not only preservation of the force, but preservation of the ammunition to protect the force as well. You can see that right hook here, guys. So we're going to move rapidly to seal off this flank, begin firing down this long axis with these armored vehicles, get my infantry dismounted so that we can establish small arms, attack by fire and support by fire positions along the enemy's left flank, our right flank as observed. We're also going to continue pressing forward with our infantry over here, our BTRs, and our tanks. I have put everybody in a watch and shoot. They'll only be engaging targets that they can positively identify in order to preserve ammunition. This is a campaign where we will not be getting a whole lot in the way of resupply, certainly no new troops or vehicles. So we got to be careful about how we use these resources. Over here we have enemy infantry surrendering. We've got enemy armor knocked out. We've occupied the north exit with at least one vehicle. Second one's on the way. We're going to dismount our infantry, get them in the wood line, and get them behind cover. And then we're going to seal off this flank from the enemy by getting in between these buildings so we can shoot along this tree line where we've seen all these enemy battle positions. And we're also going to rapidly move to engage this dude who just started engaging my tank. There's an amphibious IFV over there. That reactive armor should defend against the cannon. Our main gun should take him out here pretty quickly. Meanwhile, we're still advancing nice and easy with our infantry across the field. And we've still got a watch and shoot going with our mech vehicles and tanks just behind the infantry. Let's see how this fight unfolds. You can see that L really just tightening the noose on the enemy. With most of their vehicles knocked out, most of their infantry now retreating into the village. This is where it could start to get a little bit dicey. We're really going to have to start putting the hurt on them as their infantry are breaking contact off of their main battle positions. Because we've achieved that L, we've got good enfilade fire down the long axis of these linear danger areas in this big open danger area, allowing us to inflict massive casualties on the retreating enemy. You can also see enemy dead stacking up in the tree line and in the trench system. And then, of course, the approach march of our main assault just keeps getting closer to the enemy. All these guys are going to watch and shoot over here, so every time you hear this element shoot, they are engaging an individual enemy soldier, preserving their ammunition and inflicting massive casualties. We're going to wait for them to continue to get closer. We'll posture them on the bottom of the village and then move to assault these final locations here. The enemy finally surrendered. We lost 6 men ourselves. We had 1 wounded, and we lost 2 our armored vehicles. Pretty high price, to be honest with you, for the first match in this campaign. The enemy had 16 survivors, but 24 dead and 13 wounded, 1 missing. We destroyed 7 of their armored vehicles. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Again, this is going to be dangerously similar to what we watch unfold in real life. What we just saw was kind of a counterattack, right? We just observed counterattacks in the real world in vicinity of the Ukrainian suburbs. That long 40-kilometer Russian convoy that had been stacked up outside of Kiev was just dispersed and is now trying to like reconsolidate, reorganize. So in a sense, we just kind of replicated something very similar to that. And I'm interested to see that as this campaign continues to develop, the similarities it might have with the conflict, but more importantly, gives us an opportunity to look at the types of forces that are arrayed on both sides of the battlefield and make intelligent decisions and perform some analysis of the fight as it unfolds, and hopefully learn a little bit about the combatants on both sides, all while keeping in mind those that are being affected by this conflict and the lives that have already been lost and are yet to be lost, in ways that we might be able to support the innocent people that are harmed by virtue of what's happening in Ukraine right now. If you guys did enjoy this video, I'd invite you guys to subscribe to the channel. I do stuff like this periodically, playing the most immersive tactical shooters and combat simulations that there are out there. Also talking a lot about individual skills, small unit tactics, and all those things that we hold dear in this profession. Wish you guys all the best. I'm Controlled Pairs. I play the most immersive tactical shooters and combat sims in the world. This is Combat Mission Black Sea. I'll see you in the next one.